Hello, and welcome to the new California Landscape Valves page. In this video, I'll be talking about the valves. Here are the valves for the irrigation plan. There are 4 valves on this plan. These icons that are directly downstream of the valves represent the filter and pressure regulators for the drip. And this 4th valve is the sprinkler valve. It doesn't have a pressure regulator on it, even though we do bring down the pressure for the sprinkler system, but we do that at the sprinklers and not at the valve. We also have here this little black bow tie thing. That is a gate valve or an isolation valve. In this case, we're specifying a brass gate valve, and we'll see that in the photographs. So let's go ahead and go to the photographs now. What we have first is the Hunter ASV anti-siphon valve that we have specified for these irrigation plans. Here is the solenoid for the valve with the wires coming out. This is the part of the valve that actually gets connected to the irrigation controller, which tells the valve when to come on and off. You'll see this valve a little bit later in the manifold. We like to provide options for the irrigation valves. We have specified Hunter ASV anti-siphon valves, but here is another option. This is an Irritrol 311A valve. And here is a Rainbird ASVF anti-siphon valve. This is an exploded view of the valve manifold. You can see what we have coming in here is we have the water coming in from the source. Then we have this brass gate valve. Then it's connected to a T which goes up to the valve. The water comes in through the valve and out the outer part of it. This is the sprinkler valve. This is the drip valve. See, the water comes through a T and comes over to the drip valve, into the drip valve and out. Directly downstream of the drip valve is the filter / pressure regulator, and I'll talk about a little bit more about that later. And then this is the compression fitting that screws onto the filter pressure regulator, and then the drip tubing comes directly out of that. This is that same getup, only these are all screwed together. We have the gate valve, we have the sprinkler valve, and we have the valve with the filter, which is the drip valve. The gate valve, the isolation valve, is a very good thing to have just in case either of these valves has a problem with it. Say, for instance, it gets stuck open or it's leaking. Then you can turn this off and it won't affect the rest of the irrigation system. I would like to point out a couple of things about this valve manifold. One is that we've used Schedule 80 nipples to put all of this together. And the reason we use Schedule 80 is that it is protected really well from the UV rays of the sun, and so it doesn't break down nearly as quickly as Schedule 40 does. So Schedule 40 PVC, which is the white pipe, white PVC. So we use Schedule 80 PVC above ground. That's the standard, is that if you're going to put PVC above ground, it should be either Schedule 80, or some people even make it Schedule 40, and then they paint the pipe either black or gray so that it will be more resistant to the UV rays of the sun. Another material that you can use instead of Schedule 80 is brass. You can buy brass nipples and T's and elbows to put all of this rig together. The brass tends to be a bit expensive these days though, so I like to go with the Schedule 80. Another important point about the anti-siphon valves is that the nature of the anti-siphon valve, or the function of it, is this area right here is the anti-siphon portion of the valve. And that function is to protect the water supply, our public water supply, from the water going backwards or getting siphoned in a backwards motion back into the public water supply and contaminating the public water supply. So these valves keep that from happening. And the only way that they function to that end is to have the valves installed 6 to 12 inches above where they're watering. So you have to get it 6 to 12 inches above in elevation the area that they're watering. They will certainly work as irrigation valves. If, say, for instance, you put these guys at the bottom of a hill and then you water plants that are up the hill, the valves will still work. They'll turn on and off and they'll water, but the anti-siphon part of the valve will not work. And the valves, especially the plastic ones, when they're installed improperly, which means lower than where they're watering, then they are subjected to constant back pressure on this part of the valve, and that will break the plastic valve much sooner. It'll have a much shorter life if it has constant back pressure on this part of the valve. I would recommend that you not use galvanized pipe to create these valve manifolds. You can use either Schedule 80, painted Schedule 40, or brass, but please don't use galvanized pipe because it tends to corrode fairly quickly, and the space that you have inside the pipe for the water to run gets smaller and smaller over time. It just pinches off the water supply. And then we have downstream of the drip valve, we have the filter slash pressure regulator. Drip valves require filtration and they require that the pressure be regulated down to, I like to regulate it down to 30 psi. You can get pressure regulators that are 40, 30, 20, or even 10 psi. I like to go with 30. So this has a filter inside of it, and you can just unscrew this and open it up, pull out the filter, and just wash it periodically, maybe about once a year. And then the pressure regulation part of it is there. We'll go on to the next one. This is a way of bringing down the pressure as well, pressure regulator. This is a plumber's pressure regulator. It's brass. This can be installed upstream of the valves. So if you wanted to bring down the pressure for two valves and in one fell swoop, you could put the pressure regulator upstream. Say, for instance, you could put it here and then just move the gate valve further back this way. If you have several valves in a row, it can really pay off to go ahead and put in a brass pressure regulator upstream of the valves. This guy here. These tend to run around $80 or $90. This is a close-up of the filter pressure regulator that we have specified. It's all in one unit. They also come separately, made by other manufacturers. I really like this one because it does two jobs at the same time. It filters the water for the drip system and it regulates the pressure. This is pretty much the same function, only this is two separate components. This is the pressure regulator here, and this is the Y filter here, WYE. They are screwed together. I suppose I probably should have unscrewed them to show that it's two components, but take my word for it, it's two components. And then lastly, we have the hose bib. In the Wholesome Habitat Landscape Plan, they have called for several hose bibs around the property, mainly for providing water to in the veggie areas and the plant cleaning areas and the plant prep areas. So this concludes the screencast on irrigation valves. Thank you very much.